Welcome back to Goosebump on the Midnight series, where the most terrifying haunted stories are told. Thank you for your interest and for listening to our channel's story. Today, we'll listen to a new story titled, The Haunting of Whisper Creek. Let's listen together and guess how the story will unfold and how it will end on today's episode of Midnight Ghost Stories. Please support the channel by like the video if you enjoyed it. Comment with your thoughts on the story and its ending. Share this video with your friends and family. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next thrilling horror story. Thank you all for tuning in. The night, 7 years ago, descended upon Whisper Creek Village like a damp funeral shroud. The last downpour of late summer fell in torrents, washing the rust-red dirt road into a muddy stream. Rumbling thunder tore through the already heavy atmosphere, and occasional flashes of lightning revealed the old bamboo groves, bent and writhing in the wind. That night, the entire village of Whisper Creek seemed to be lost in a deep, weary slumber, no one aware that at a gentle bend of the Whisper Creek River, a young life was being swallowed by eternal darkness. The next morning, as the first weak rays of sun pierced the gray clouds, the tragedy was discovered. A few women on their way to the early market cried out in horror when they saw the conical hat of Alara, daughter of Old Hemlock, floating near a cluster of reeds by the bank. Alara was the flower of the village, not just for her pure, rustic beauty, but also for her talented hands that could breathe life into clay. The ceramics she made possessed a delicate beauty, a unique glaze that no kiln in the village, not even the grand kiln of the village chief, Hawthorne, could match. The terrible news spread faster than a wildfire. The whole village rushed to the riverbank. Old Hemlock, the perpetually drunk, gaunt father with his characteristic hunchback, came staggering, his weathered face now contorted in pain. He fell to his knees on the riverbank, letting out inarticulate wails. Only his despair was tangible, clawing at the hearts of the onlookers. Daniel, Hawthorne's only son, was also in the crowd. His face was pale, his usually sharp eyes now vacant and hollow, staring blankly at the terrifyingly placid surface of the river. He stood frozen like a statue, saying nothing, while his father, Hawthorne, loudly commanded the young men of the village to search the river. Hawthorne, with his stately demeanor and booming, authoritative voice, quickly reassured everyone. He suggested that Alara had probably slipped and fallen into the river during last night's storm. A regrettable accident. The local police were called, but they only briefly recorded the village chief's testimony and a few villagers' accounts before quickly concluding it was a tragic drowning. No one dared to question it. In this village, Hawthorne was the law, he was the sky. His word carried more weight than evidence. They searched for several days but couldn't find Alara's body. The Whisper Creek River was usually gentle, but everyone knew its depths held hidden whirlpools. Once pulled in, it was almost impossible to be found. Old Hemlock, after days of crying until his tears ran dry, sank deeper into drinking, becoming a ghostly shadow in his own home. Daniel became withdrawn and quiet, shutting himself in the pottery workshop all day, but the pieces he made afterward were all soulless, devoid of life. A few weeks later, Old Hemlock was seen quietly packing a few belongings, locking the house he had lived in his whole life, and leaving the village for good. Whisper Creek returned to its inherent solemnity, but something had changed forever. A gloomy shadow fell over the moss-covered tiled roofs. People began to whisper about strange things. Someone returning late from the field swore they had heard a mournful lullaby drifting from the riverbank. A wordless lullaby, just long, haunting, and sorrowful refrains of "Oh, my love," chilling to the bone. Stories about Ilara's vengeful spirit began to be woven, but whenever anyone mentioned it, Hawthorne would dismiss it as nonsense and superstition. Gradually, no one dared to speak Ilara's name anymore. The secret of the talented, ill-fated young woman's death, along with the unjust lullaby, slowly sank into the mists of time, becoming a festering scar in the memory of the ancient village by the Whisper Creek. 7 years, a period long enough for a sapling to become a great tree, for a child to grow up, and for a crime thought long buried to begin to stir, demanding to be brought to light. The old, cramped bus, packed with people and goods, dropped Liam off on the familiar red dirt road at dusk. The air was thick with the earthy smell of mud after a late summer rain and the pungent aroma of wood smoke from the time-worn tiled roofs. Whisper Creek was the same as ever, solemn and ancient, like a forgotten ink-wash painting beside a languidly flowing branch of the river. It had been 7 years since Liam had returned. 7 years, long enough for a boy to become a man, for gravel paths to be replaced by clumsy concrete, and for memories thought long dormant to begin to stir. Liam adjusted the heavy backpack on his shoulders, the fatigue from the long journey mingling with an invisible tightness creeping into his chest. He hadn't come back just for the research project on the Pottery Village's culture that his superiors had assigned him. That was just a perfect excuse. The truth was, the glamorous city had become too cramped, too noisy for someone like him, who had just been dumped and had lost his career path. The image of Sarah, his girlfriend throughout his university years, holding hands with another man in a fancy cafe had become a deep gash in his heart. He needed a place to hide, a place quiet enough to patch up his broken soul. And Whisper Creek, with its gentle childhood memories with his grandfather, seemed to be the only choice. His grandfather's house was at the end of the village, separated from the hustle and bustle, near the Whisper Creek riverbank. The three-section house with its yin-yang tiled roof and earthen walls had been looked after by his cousin. Although no one lived there regularly, it still retained the warmth of life, not completely desolate. Liam pushed the creaking wooden gate, a familiar sound from the past echoing back, knocking on the door of his memory. He stepped into the yard, the green moss on the steps making him feel as if he were intruding on a deep sleep. Everything was the same, from the gnarled, barren guava tree in the front yard to the large, cracked water jar lying silently in the corner. The only thing was, the person from the past was no longer there. His grandfather had passed away 3 years ago. He hadn't made it back in time to see him one last time. That regret still silently tormented him. Liam spent the evening cleaning up. He wiped his grandfather's altar, lit an incense stick, its thin smoke dancing in the silent space. He rearranged the furniture, trying to recapture the familiar feeling of the old days. But the emptiness in the house and in his own soul was too vast. The first night in Whisper Creek was truly quiet, a terrifying kind of quiet. In the city, one gets used to the blare of horns, the lonely cries of late-night vendors, the ceaseless noise of a life that never sleeps. Here, when night fell, all that remained was the monotonous symphony of insects chirping in the garden and the wind rustling through the leaves like whispers. Liam lay on the creaky bamboo bed in the middle room, his eyes wide open, staring at the pitch-black ceiling. He tried to push away the image of Sarah, her smile, her voice. He tried to think about his project proposal, about the ancient pottery kilns, about the unique local worship of the water goddess that he had read about in documents. But his mind was empty, a void of aimlessness and fatigue. Suddenly, from the direction of the riverbank, a strange sound drifted in. It wasn't the sound of insects, nor was it the wind. It crept through the thick night air, faint but clear enough to penetrate the earthen walls. It was a lullaby. A wordless lullaby, just long, haunting, and mournful refrains of "Oh, my love." The voice of a woman, sometimes distant, sometimes near, sometimes as if right beside his ear, other times as if echoing from somewhere deep beneath the Whisper Creek River. Liam sat bolt upright, a cold chill running down his spine. Cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He listened intently. The lullaby continued, steady, agonizing, as if recounting a never-ending tale of unjust love. It had none of the warmth of a mother's love, none of the sweet comfort. It only held sorrow, coldness, and a relentless obsession. He tiptoed to the open window. It was a moonless night, with only the faint light of a few stars glimmering against the black sky. By the riverbank, the night mist had cast a hazy, mystical layer, shrouding everything in a milky white veil. It must be some family lulling a child to sleep, he reassured himself, but even he knew the reason was far-fetched. It was well past midnight, and all the houses near the riverbank were silent. Moreover, this lullaby carried a strange anguish, an unnameable pain. The lullaby lasted for about 15 minutes, then stopped, returning the night to a chilling silence. Liam couldn't get back to sleep. He felt as if someone was standing in the yard, right under the guava tree, staring at him through the window. The feeling of being watched was so intense that he had to quickly draw the curtain, even though he knew it was just a product of his imagination, stretched taut like a rubber band after a tiring day and emotional turmoil. He stayed awake all night. The next morning, Liam tried to forget the strange experience of the previous night, attributing it to being in a new place and his unstable state of mind. He started his work. His first destination was the house of Hawthorne, the chief of Whisper Creek Village. The chief's house was in the most prime location in the village, large and well-built, standing out from the surrounding dilapidated houses. Hawthorne was a respectable-looking man, nearly 60 but still robust, his salt and pepper hair neatly combed, a smile always on his lips. He received Liam with an excessive warmth. Well, if it isn't Old Man Howell's grandson. So grown up, I didn't recognize you. When your grandfather passed, I was too busy to go to the city. I feel terrible about it. What brings you back to the village this time, son? Liam explained his research project on pottery culture, his desire to learn about the history and unique techniques of Whisper Creek. Hawthorne nodded in approval, constantly praising young people who knew how to look back at their roots. He promised to create every condition for Liam to work, to introduce him to the old artisans in the village. Our village has many interesting things, son. You should learn about the history of our family's kiln, about the worship of the goddess, Hawthorne said, pointing to the grand altar of the water goddess placed majestically in the central room. The altar was lacquered and gilded, majestic and splendid. Just don't pay attention to the silly ghost stories that the old women like to spread. Hawthorne's words made Liam pause. Ghost stories. Hawthorne waved his hand, laughing heartily, a somewhat forced laugh. Ah, every rural village has a few fabricated stories. Things about vengeful spirits, about retribution. You're an educated man, don't believe in that stuff, it'll just tire you out. Hawthorne's evasiveness made Liam even more curious. He remembered the mournful lullaby from last night. He tried to ask more, tactfully. I heard, it seems our village had an accident before. A long time ago, a young girl. The smile on Hawthorne's face stiffened slightly, though only for a brief moment. He glanced quickly towards the inner room, where Liam caught a glimpse of Daniel, his son, hiding behind the door. Ah, you mean the story of Alara, old Hemlock's daughter, he replied, his voice somewhat less enthusiastic. Poor girl, talented but ill-fated. Slipped and drowned at the riverbank. It's been 7 years already. People keep spreading rumors that she died unjustly, so her soul can't rest, just wanders the riverbank singing lullabies. All nonsense. The land has its guardian, the river has its spirit, there's no way ghosts can run rampant. Hawthorne quickly changed the subject, asking about Liam's work in the city, about his family. But Liam had already noticed something unusual in his eyes. A defensiveness. A concealment. The name Alara, and the story of the vengeful spirit singing by the riverbank, seemed to be a taboo subject in Whisper Creek. Leaving Hawthorne's house, Liam felt an urge to find out more about this girl named Alara. His research project suddenly had an unexpected turn, a turn full of mystery and danger. He walked along the village path, passing an abandoned house nestled under the shade of an old Bodhi tree. The iron gate was rusted, and vines were tangled everywhere. A sense of mourning and coldness emanated from the place, even though the sun was shining brightly. That's old Hemlock's house, a hoarse voice said beside him. Liam startled and turned around. It was an old woman, with white hair and a hunched back, holding a worn-out conical hat. She looked at him with clear eyes, a gaze that seemed to see through everything. Since the day Alara died, he also left the village for good. Probably couldn't stand the old place and the memories, the old woman said, her voice even, her gaze fixed on the house in the distance. Ma'am, may I ask, about Miss Alara? Liam hesitated. The old woman didn't answer immediately. She looked at the abandoned house, then at the distant riverbank. The poor girl. Talented but ill-fated. When her hands touched clay, it was as if the clay itself had a soul. With that, the old woman turned and walked slowly down the village path, leaving Liam alone with her cryptic words. The clay itself had a soul. The phrase haunted Liam's mind. He ventured closer to the abandoned house. Through a crack in the gate, he saw the yard overgrown with weeds, higher than his knees. There was a small pottery kiln, half collapsed, with bricks and tiles scattered about. Next to the kiln were a few unfinished pottery pieces, covered in a thick layer of 7 years' worth of dust. Suddenly, Liam's eyes fell on a small, glittering object at the foot of the mossy wall. He reached his hand through the gate, trying to retrieve it with a dry branch. It was a small ceramic vase, the size of a fist, with a jade-green glaze, now smudged with mud. The vase had a very strange shape, unlike any pottery he had ever seen in Whisper Creek. It was elegant, soft, and had an indescribable, bewitching beauty. The moment Liam's fingers touched the vase, a sudden, icy chill ran down his spine, colder than the chill from the previous night. The mournful lullaby suddenly echoed in his head, crystal clear. "Oh, my love." Along with it came a flashing image, a girl in a white peasant blouse, her long hair loose, sitting at a potter's wheel, her hands deftly shaping a block of clay. Her face was unclear, but he could feel the deep sadness in her eyes, a heart-wrenching beauty. Liam quickly pulled his hand back, his heart pounding. The small vase fell to the ground, rolling into the grass. He stood frozen, trying to catch his breath. What just happened? Was it a hallucination? Or was there really something, a memory, stored inside that ceramic vase? His initial skepticism began to waver. Curiosity had now turned into a vague fear. He knew that his escape trip was over. He had just accidentally touched a secret that the entire village of Whisper Creek was trying to bury. And that secret, it seemed, did not want to rest in peace. The following nights in Whisper Creek became a form of mental torture for Liam. The lullaby no longer just echoed from the distant riverbank. It had moved closer, weaving through every corner of the garden, hiding in the rustling wind and the guava leaves. One night, he awoke with a start, feeling as though someone was gently stroking his cheek, a touch as cold as the icy hand of the dead. He opened his eyes wide, only to see the thick darkness and a chilling silence. His sleep was fitful, plagued by bizarre and increasingly vivid nightmares. He dreamed he was sinking slowly into the muddy bottom of Whisper Creek, the earth clinging to his limbs, heavy and oppressive. Icy water filled his lungs, stealing every bit of oxygen. And long black hair, like seaweed, swirled around his face, obscuring the faint light from above. He struggled in vain, feeling the despair of a person slowly dying. He would wake up with a jolt, drenched in sweat, gasping for breath as if he had just survived a real life or death struggle. During the day, Liam tried to bury himself in work to forget his fear. He went to the pottery kiln of Hawthorne's family, which was managed by Daniel, his childhood friend. Hawthorne's kiln had been heavily modernized, the largest in the village, mass-producing products sold to various provinces. Daniel, now a mature-looking business owner, greeted him warmly. But Liam, with the sensitivity of someone being haunted, could sense the anxiety and restlessness hidden behind his friend's confident exterior. Daniel's eyes always carried a hint of fatigue, with dark circles under them, as if he hadn't slept for many nights. "How's business?" Liam asked, trying to start a natural conversation. "Just getting by," Daniel replied, his hand fiddling with a cracked glazed teacup. "This trade is tough now. None of the young people want to follow it. You have to invest in machinery, mass-produced to compete. In a few years, all the manual kilns in the village will probably close down." Liam looked around the workshop. Everything was professionally invested, with a modern gas kiln and a large-capacity clay mixer, a stark contrast to the traditional wood-fired kilns he had seen. "Looks like you're doing big business, though. No one in this village can compare to your family." Daniel gave a faint smile, one that didn't reach his eyes. "It's just a facade, my friend. I'm worried and stressed all the time. Can't even sleep peacefully at night." Daniel's phrase "can't even sleep peacefully at night" caught Liam's attention. "You have trouble sleeping too?" Daniel startled, dropping the teacup from his hand onto the tiled floor. The sound of shattering ceramic was sharp and piercing in the noisy workshop. "Ah. No. Just stressed from too much work lately," he said, stooping to quickly pick up the pieces, trying to avoid Liam's gaze. His fingers were trembling slightly. Daniel's reaction was too unusual. Liam felt that his friend was hiding a fear similar to his own. He decided to test the waters. When Daniel wasn't paying attention, Liam asked nonchalantly, "Hey Daniel, do you remember that girl Alara? Old Hemlock's daughter?" Daniel's hand, which was cleaning up the shards, froze. He was silent for a long moment, his back stiff. Then he slowly stood up, his friendly demeanor gone, his voice turning cold. "Of course, I remember. Why are you suddenly asking about her?" "No reason. I passed by her old house the other day. It looked so desolate. I heard she died unjustly, is that true?" "Nonsense!" Daniel snapped, his tone sharper than necessary. "She slipped and drowned. The police already concluded it. Are you here to research pottery or to listen to village gossip? Anyway, I have to go. Feel free to look around. Let me know if you need anything." With that, Daniel walked away, leaving Liam alone in the workshop feeling bewildered. Daniel's reaction only confirmed Liam's suspicions. Alara's death was certainly not a simple accident. It was a wound that both Daniel and his father wanted to cover up. But why? Daniel used to be very close to Alara. Liam remembered when they were kids, he, Daniel, and Alara would often play with clay together. Alara was always the most skillful one. Determined to find the truth, Liam returned to Alara's abandoned house. This time, he didn't just watch from the outside. He found a collapsed section of the wall, slipped past the rotten gate, and went inside. The weeds were waist-high and damp. The air was stagnant, carrying a musty smell and an indescribable chill. He went straight to the collapsed kiln. The small, jade-green ceramic vase he had seen before was still there, hidden in the grass. He took a deep breath, braced himself, and picked it up. This time, the cold sensation was even more intense. Holding the vase, Liam not only heard the lullaby, but also saw images appearing in his mind more clearly, like a distorted old film. He saw Alara arguing fiercely with a man in her pottery workshop. He couldn't see the man's face, only his large, sturdy back and his angry voice. Alara seemed both frightened and angry. Then the scene changed. He saw Alara running for her life in the dark night, the rain pouring down. Behind her were the heavy, hurried footsteps of someone in pursuit. She was running towards the riverbank. The final image was of a large, rough hand grabbing her wrist, yanking her back. Her scream was drowned out by the rain and thunder. Liam was stunned, having to lean against the kiln wall to stay upright. He gasped for air, sweat pouring down his face. This wasn't imagination. This was a memory. Alara's memory, somehow, had been preserved in the last object she had poured her heart and soul into creating. She had been murdered. He began to search the area more carefully. He believed there had to be something else left behind. In the ruins of the kiln, under the broken bricks, he found a small, rotted wooden box wrapped in a piece of oilcloth. The moisture had decayed the wood, but the contents were still relatively intact. Inside were a few of Alara's personal items, a discolored horn comb, a few yellowed letters, and a small notebook bound in rough cloth.